Good evening everyone, and welcome to your third instalment of the Royal Marines It's a State of Mind mini-series. Hopefully you already know by now, but I'm Captain Ryan and I'm looking forward to delivering tonight's episode to you, which will be done once again by full serving Royal Marines. Hopefully most of you watching have already seen the first two shows, but if not, as always, we'll send out the links to these shows at the end of tonight's episode. To recap what we've covered so far in the series, you've had a presentation on both the Glock 17 and SA-80 weapon systems, which means we've covered the two main weapons that we would ordinarily carry. Tonight, the weapons encyclopedia himself, Coops, will talk to you about one of the weapons that would be employed as a section level weapon. You've also seen a demonstration of the way to conduct Royal Marines style warm-up and cooldowns, along with the two circuits that have covered posterior chain strength and explosive power. This week, the lads will be showing you the correct way in which to conduct pull-ups, which is super important to ensure you train using the correct technique. They'll then deliver you this week's circuit, which will certainly get your heart going. Tonight, we have Joe with us once he's finished delivering you the PT circuit to talk about his specialisation. As a vehicle mechanic, he is often responsible for maintaining the mobility vehicles in the Royal Marines and is clearly relied upon to fix anything mechanical whilst we're deployed and out on the ground. We will then talk to Joe about his experience of training and hear a little more about weeks 15 to 21 of recruit training, which will begin to develop troop level skills and more specialist areas like urban and close quarter battle tactics and techniques. As always, this series is here to ensure that you are best prepared for your pre-joining fitness test and make sure that you know what to expect when you start recruit training. Remember, as I always say, training is designed to be tough and push you to your limits so that we have the very best Royal Marines once you finish and earn your Green Beret. However, we don't want the finished product arriving on day one. We want a determined and physically capable man or woman that is willing to give it their all. Some of the more observant amongst you may have noticed that we are all wearing our new CU20 uniform. Just quickly to run you through it, this uniform is bespoke to us and will only be issued to Royal Marines or other commandos that support us throughout 3 Commando Brigade. It is clearly the same multicam pattern as our old uniform, but a bit more fit for purpose and robust. We have the field uniform, which is what I'm wearing now, and then the combat uniform, which is pretty much the same, but a specially designed knee pads built into the trousers and sweat wicking shirt to wear under body armour, just to make it a bit more comfortable in the different environments that we operate in. You can also see that our flashes have changed from the olive green style like they have been in recent years, back to the red and black colour scheme which were originally worn by the Commandos when developed during World War II. These are backed with Velcro, so removable if the tactical situation dictates. As before, the chat function is live, so please feel free to ask away with any questions you've got for us. I'll also give you our direct contact details at the end, so you can get in touch with our specialist team to find out as much as you like about all things Royal Marines. Right, again, that's enough from me now. It's time for Coop to talk you through this week's weapon system. Okay, ladies and gents, once again we've got Coops at the side of me who's going to talk you through this week's weapon. So far in the series, we've covered the Glock and the SA-80, which are our personal primary weapons. This one is the first one that we use as a section level weapon. Coops, do you just want to expand on that a bit more?
So in front of us today, we've got the sharpshooter rifle. So this is something that you won't actually cover during your recruit training. Once you successfully complete training and achieve the Green Beret, go to a commando unit. It's then something you will train up on as a specialist in a commando unit. So a few sort of statistics about it. It's a slightly larger caliber than the C8 and the SA-80 we've talked about before, this firing a 7.62 millimeter. The actual working mechanism is very similar to the C8, which can sort of paint a picture for you there. Indeed, the cock and handle, trigger mechanism, and the magazine placement is all absolutely identical, and even down to the folding stock on it as well. Onto the optic itself, so again, slightly better optic than we would see with the C8 and SA-80. So this is a ×6 ACOG sight with the emergency battle sight red dot on top. If for whatever reason you do find yourself in a close quarter battle environment with this weapon. It's got a detachable bipod legs. You would sort of normally have them on because primarily you want to be using this in the prone position which is basically lying down. So you're in the most secure fire position, you can get the most accurate shooting done. Now, by the book, effective range of this is 600 meters with suppressing fire out to 800. Now, with the Marines trained as much as we are in marksmanship, I believe you can push this range much further, but that depends on the actual individual fire, the individual firer.
Awesome, yeah, good statistics on the weapon, and as you can see, it's pretty aesthetically pleasing, so it's certainly one of the more preferred ones. Do you just want to talk everyone through exactly sort of how we would employ it within a section? As I mentioned, it's a section level weapon.
Yeah, so section level weapon. So basically that means that in your normal sort of section layout where most of the guys will be rolling with SA-80s or potentially C8s, this will be there as a sort of support weapon, potentially alongside the general purpose machine gun, which we'll come on to in a later episode. So this works really well at providing sort of accurate precision fire out to the longer ranges beyond the ranges of our SA-80s and stuff like that. So basically providing a very good sort of cover for movement, allowing lads to close the distance on the battlefield whilst being covered by this weapon system.
As you mentioned, we use this as a section weapon, which for someone like me as a troop commander, for example, or yourself as a section commander or fire team commander, is mega useful because we can use it to pinpoint the targets at a longer range much more accurately than you could with an area weapon like the GPMG, but more to follow on that. You mentioned that the people viewing probably wouldn't use this throughout recruit training, and then obviously once you get to a unit, everybody's then trained on it, is that correct?
So for the most part, we will try and train as many people as we can, because the more people we have trained on it, the better, because then you can sort of jump in and out of a section as required. For the most part, it will go to sort of what's known as the section marksman, essentially the best shot within a section. You want the precision weapon to be in his hands, because he can make the best effect from it.
Awesome, yeah, thanks a lot, Coops. That was a great overview on the weapon for everyone viewing, and certainly something you can look forward to using once you've passed out of recruit training. Focus on the basics first and work your way up to something like this, and then on to further things like the sniper rifle, etc, etc. Next up, we're going to head over to Joe and Blaine for this week's PT session.
Welcome to Session 3. I'm Joe and this is Blaine. Session 3 is a metabolic conditioner where we will start to introduce your body to exercising in an oxygen deficit. This will aid in developing your overall body conditioning and also pain threshold, which will be tested constantly during recruit training. During recruit training PT sessions, you will be required to maintain perfect exercise form during some of the hardest sessions you'll ever face. None more so than on the bottom field, where oxygen is free and abundant if only you have the time to take some on board. We're now going to move into the PT session, which will be conducted as many rounds as possible in 20 minutes. First exercise is broad jumps. V-sits. Mountain climbers. And lunge with kick through. On completion of your first round of exercises, you will then conduct a 400-meter run. We're now going to break down each exercise individually to make sure you get perfect technique. First up, broad jumps. As you can see, Blaine's adopted the starting position, feet shoulder width apart, hands cupped in front of him to maintain his balance. He's then going to squat down and take a leap forward. You want to make sure that you leap as far as you can. This will really develop your power in your legs. Next exercise, V-sits. Adopting the starting position of this exercise, he's got his hands cupped above his head, feet and knees together, legs outstretched with his feet off of the floor. He's then going to crunch in the middle, bring his hands to his toes, and then back down again. Next exercise, mountain climbers. Adopting the starting position of this exercise is like the press-ups. His hands are shoulder width apart, head and eyes facing forward, maintaining a nice neutral spine. He's then going to bring his knees individually forward to his chest. Next exercise, lunge with kick through. He's going to step back to the rear, touch his knee to the floor, bring his leg forward and kick all the way through. You can have your hands cupped across your chest to maintain balance. If you want to take this a step further, you can bring your hands, kick through and back down again. As I said, once you've completed these exercises, you're then going to conduct a 400-metre run. Blaine has just demonstrated each exercise that you'll be conducting during this session. We've broken it down so you can see the technique. We're now going to cut away and get the bar set up so we can give you a teach on how to conduct Royal Marine style pull-ups. Blaine's now going to demonstrate how to conduct a Royal Marine style pull-up. A few points to this: you need to make sure that your feet and knees are together throughout. But when you pull yourself above the bar, your chin does go above the bar and it's an overhand grip. Whilst practicing these in your gym, it's key to remember that you will not be conducting these on a bar at CTC. It is done on a gymnasium beam. As I said, you need to make sure that your chin goes above the bar fully to get a full rep. And make sure that you go all the way down to a dead hang and break the inertia. Otherwise you will have reps taken off of you at CTC. We've had today's PT session and an individual breakdown of each exercise. We've also had a pull-up teach on how to conduct a Royal Marine style pull-up. In session 4, we'll cover the next fitness session and we'll also go into the ROP.
Thanks to Joe and Blaine for this week's circuit and the pull-up demo. As they said, it's super important to make sure you train using the correct technique and to the correct cadence, so please keep that in mind. Joe is going to join us now and talk us through his specialisation, but before he does, I'll talk you through some more of the SSQs that we started last week. Now, moving on to the second half of the first column, we'll start with Combat Information Warfare Operator. This is vital to providing an expert information warfare service to help control the battlefield. Next up is Combat Logistician. This role is absolutely essential to ensuring all elements of the corps are maintained with the correct kit, equipment and supplies. Further down, you can see Combat Marksman, which is quite simply a highly trained commando who would be using the sharpshooter weapon which Coops talked us through earlier. This allows for a longer range precision fire which would be employed as a section level asset as we mentioned. After that, you can see Combat Mechanic. Joe is a mechanic, so he can talk us through more of that shortly. Combat Medic is next on the list. Although we are all trained to a certain level, this would ensure that there are highly trained Marines that are better equipped to deal with incidents and injuries whilst operating at reach. Next is Combat Mobility. These will be Marines who have completed advanced driving qualifications to enable competent manoeuvre over all types of terrain using the different vehicles employed by the Royal Marines. Moving down, we can see Combat PT. Blaine, who will speak to us in a later episode, has just completed this course so he can tell us more. But in a nutshell, it will allow Marines across the Corps to conduct certain PT sessions and tests, as well as maintaining everyone's Royal Marines close combat skills. The penultimate one on the list is Combat Recce Operator. It is a qualification that will further train you to be employed in Specialist Reconnaissance Team and potentially work in the Royal Marines Organic Recce Asset SRS, or Surveillance and Reconnaissance Squadron. Finally, at the bottom of the list, we have Combat Unmanned Systems Operator. This is a new and technologically advanced qualification which will allow you to be the pilot of the different drones and other unmanned vehicles which we'll be using moving forward. Next week, I'll talk you through the primary specialisations, or PSQs, that you can do whilst you're still a Marine. Right, now it's time to speak to Joe about his career. Would you mind just giving everyone a bit of an overview about your career so far?
Okay, so I joined the Royal Marines in October 2009, so I've served roughly 11 years now. I joined the VM specialisation about 4 years after joining up. Before I became a VM, I served in Afghanistan, so got to see combat operations whilst being a Marine. Ever since then, I've moved into the vehicle mechanic role, and that's my PSQ, my primary specialisation.
Obviously, you're a vehicle mechanic, as we've said a few times. Do you just want to sort of explain to everyone what that entails and what you get up to in that job?
Okay, so my day-to-day routine is, as a mechanic, as much as you would expect in a civilian walk of life, is to make sure that the mobile platforms that we use in the Royal Marines are up to date and ready to roll out each and every day. It's a very important role because, let's say, we need those mobile platforms ready to go for the lads that are going out on the ground.
Obviously, as we mentioned earlier, one of the SSQs is combat mechanic, and that's just sort of a smaller qualification to give you the ability to fix things whilst out on the ground before then retrieving that vehicle back to someone like Joe who can fix it in the workshop. I think we'll talk a little bit about how you did the training for vehicle mechanic, if that's all right.
Yeah, so you go to an army camp, which is Remy Lynham. We do tri-service training there. You spend 11 months doing your basic mechanics course, where you learn, as I say, basic individual skills and techniques to operate on engines, transmissions, and the vehicle platforms that are specific to the corps.
Yeah, awesome, cool. Hopefully that gave everyone a bit of an overview of it. And those of you that are out there that didn't know you could do that, well, now you know you can be a mechanic in the Royal Marines. I think now we'll move on to training and give everyone a bit of an overview of that. Just want to quickly run over your experience with it. I know it was obviously a long time ago now, but just how you found it in general.
Yeah, my experience training, I found it very, very challenging. I mean, I'm rather vertically challenged, so there were a lot of things in there that I struggled with, such as yomping. A lot of things that I found particularly that I was quite strong at, so speed marching, moving at pace was more my thing than carrying weights, but obviously PTIs are there to build that up and get you to the level, so I managed to make it through.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty true, to be honest. Same for me as well. Like you say, struggle with yomping a little bit if you're a little bit smaller, but for your info, yomping is essentially when you've got your burger on your back and you're conducting a march across any sort of terrain. So that's what yomping is, if you didn't know. This week we're going to focus on sort of weeks 16 to 21 and the sort of troop build-up part of training. Do you just want to sort of talk to everyone about what you do in that phase of training?
Yeah, so I believe that this stage of training is pretty much the most exciting part of it. You're really building from the first stages of training where you're doing your basic field craft and all that good stuff. You really start to move into the troop section and troop level skills. And you're doing a lot more urban warfare stuff, which for me personally was my favourite part of training. Yeah,
absolutely, I agree. I mean, like you said, during this part of training, that's where you really start feeling like a Royal Marine and getting the job done. What sort of fitness are you doing through that part of training?
So at this stage, you're really starting to hammer home the bottom field sessions. So all of the assault course sessions that you're going through, because you're starting to close in on the bottom field pass out, which is as you know, the crucial test that you come to through training. So the sessions get really difficult.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome, thanks for that. Great sort of explanation. As you say, it's basically that final build-up before you cross that tier into the Commando phase, which is then the final push to get in your green beret. Finally, before I let you go, would you mind just giving, if you had one piece of advice to give to someone that's sat watching now who's got their application in, just a piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, I mean, the piece of advice, even a piece of advice that I would love to be able to give to my younger self is do not stress about being the finished product. A lot of people get caught up in the image of what a Royal Marine is, and they just need to focus on one step at a time being in training. So at this stage, I would say focus on the VPGFT criteria, and the furthest you want to look is the RMFA criteria. Yeah. Get that stuff nailed and you can't go far wrong.
Thanks a lot for that, Joe. That was an awesome piece of advice. And as I keep saying to you, we don't expect that finished product to turn up on day one. We just want that fit and robust individual who is uninjured and absolutely willing to give it their all. So thanks a lot for that. Next week, we'll be speaking to Lewis, who is a landing craftsman. His specialisation is absolutely essential, as obviously with the Royal Navy's amphibious fighting force. We'll then talk to him about the Commando phase of training, which is a sort of last 8 to 9 weeks before you then attempt the Commando tests, so he's super important. Okay, ladies and gents, that is us drawing episode 3 to a close. As you remember, toward the start of the show, we had Coops on talking us about the sharpshooter, which is a section level weapon. Hopefully you gained a good insight into that weapon from the way he explained it. Joe and Blaine then delivered an expert demonstration of the pull-up and the way in which we do it. You'll begin to realise pretty soon that the way that Royal Marines do particular exercises is quite different to how you might see people doing it in a gym. And this is super important to ensure that you, for example with the pull-up, get your chin fully above the bar and fully extend your arms on the extension. They then delivered this week's circuit, which will get sent to you afterwards for you to have a go. We then had Joe come with us and speak to us about his career and time spent as a vehicle mechanic, as well as getting a bit of an insight from what he remembers from training, particularly sort of weeks 16 to 21. We talked about more of the SSQs, which again we'll cover more into next week. As I look forward to the next episode, Coops will be back on talking to us about the shotgun. We employ this weapon a little differently from other weapons, so that'll be pretty interesting for you to hear. We'll have more physical training from Blaine and Joe, and they're going to talk you through the recruit orientation phase criteria and the Commando aptitude assessment, which is what you must pass before commencing mainstream Royal Marines training. We'll be speaking to Lewis about his time as a landing craftsman before talking about more of the SSQs and what he remembers about the Commando phase of training. As always, the contact details to get in touch with us will be available at the end of the show, but other than that, I'll see you guys next week.